The archaeology press briefing was supposed to last 20 minutes. That was what the university communications team had promised the reporters. 20 minutes for the announcement, 10 minutes for questions, a few controlled photographs, and then the artifacts would be returned to the conservation lab before anyone could ask something legally inconvenient. The room was small, modern, and too bright. A university seal hung on the wall behind a narrow podium. Two display cases stood beneath soft conservation lights. A long table held folders, site maps, object photographs, and a covered tray containing the item everyone had come to see, a small clay burial seal recovered from the Ashara Valley excavation. Outside, cameras waited. Inside, power was deciding who would get to tell the story. Dr. Nia Brooks stood near the display case with dust still under one fingernail. She was black, 37, and the field director who had led the excavation for 3 seasons through heat, funding delays, collapsed trenches, broken equipment, and a dozen committee members who preferred clean conclusions to complicated ground. She knew the site layer by layer. She knew which soil changed after rain, which burial chamber had been disturbed in antiquity, which pottery fragments had washed downhill, and which artifacts belonged where because she had pulled them out of the earth herself. Across from her stood Professor Harold Whitcomb. He was white, 63, famous, and comfortable in the old authority of archaeology. Books, lectures, endowed chairs, museum boards, and excavation photographs where younger people stood in the background holding tools. Harold had not been in the trench when the seal was found. He had not mapped the chamber. He had not stayed past midnight when the burial wall nearly collapsed. But he had written the standard textbook on Ashara Valley royal burials, and that made him dangerous. Because Nia's discovery challenged him. For decades, scholars believed Tomb 14 belonged to a minor provincial governor. Harold's own theory said the burial goods were too modest for royalty and the architecture too irregular for a dynastic chamber. Nia disagreed. Her team had uncovered a side crypt, a ceremonial bead pattern, and now a burial seal that appeared to match the royal housemark found in the Capitol archives. If the seal matched, Tomb 14 was not provincial, it was royal. And Harold's theory would become outdated before the cameras finished setting up. He lifted the printed photograph of the seal and smiled faintly. "Dr. Brooks, I admire the excitement, but this is a dangerous leap." Nia looked at him. "It is not a leap. It is a match. A possible visual similarity. A seal impression with the same crescent throne mark, same double reed border, and same reversed falcon glyph." Harold gave a soft laugh. "Field discoveries have a way of looking more dramatic in the hands of the excavator." There it was, the excavator. Not principal investigator, not field director, not the person with the stratigraphic record. The excavator. Hands in dirt, not mind in history. Nia kept her voice even. "The context is secure." "So you say. So the excavation records show?" He glanced toward the communications director. "This is exactly why I suggested we describe the object as elite administrative rather than royal. It is responsible language." "It is evasive language." His smile tightened. A junior conservator looked down at the table. Harold stepped closer to the covered tray. "Nia, you are an excellent field archaeologist. No one disputes that." "No one disputes." She almost smiled. "But interpretation requires caution," he continued. "A burial seal found in a disturbed valley site cannot overturn decades of classification in one press briefing. The seal was found in a sealed side crypt, beneath an intact plaster collapse, beside the bead pattern associated with royal women of the early Asharan period. Associated, yes, not exclusive. Nothing in archaeology is exclusive until enough men put it in a textbook." The room went silent. Harold's face reddened. "That is unnecessary. So is downgrading the evidence before you examine it." He turned toward the university provost who stood near the door looking increasingly nervous. "We should not allow premature claims to damage institutional credibility." Nia looked at him. "Institutional credibility is not protected by hiding the strongest interpretation. It is protected by not letting ambition outrun proof. Ambition. The word landed exactly where he wanted it. When Harold defended a theory for 30 years, it was scholarship. When Nia challenged it with new evidence, it was ambition. She removed a folder from the table and opened it. Then let's discuss proof. He sighed. We do not have time for a seminar. We have time before you stand at that podium and erase the discovery. The provost finally spoke. Dr. Brooks, what do you need? The archival seal comparison. Harold shook his head. The archive image is damaged. It is damaged, not useless. It cannot support a public royal attribution. Nia looked toward the conservator. Mara, open the overlay. The conservator hesitated, then connected her laptop to the small monitor. Harold's eyes narrowed. This was not approved for press. It is not for press yet, Nia said. It is for the people trying to decide what the press is allowed to hear. The monitor lit up with 3 images: the burial seal from Tomb 14, the damaged Royal Archive seal from the Capitol, and a digital overlay created from both. At first, the match was not obvious to anyone unfamiliar with seal impressions. Clay had warped, edges were broken, ancient pressure had distorted the mark. Nia pointed carefully. The double reed border aligns here, the crescent throne mark aligns here. The falcon glyph appears reversed because the archive image is from the stamp face, while ours is the clay impression. Mara activated the overlay. The lines slid together. The crescent matched, the falcon matched, the border matched. The room became very quiet. Harold stared at the screen. Then he said, "It could be a workshop imitation." Nia opened another file. We tested the clay composition. It matches ceremonial sealing clay from the Capitol Archive, not local administrative clay. He said nothing. She clicked again. Residue analysis shows traces of myrrh and blue mineral pigment consistent with royal burial sealing rites. The provost stepped closer. Why wasn't this in the briefing packet? Nia turned to Harold. Because Professor Whitcomb removed the royal attribution language. Harold's jaw tightened. I requested caution. You requested silence. The room froze. Outside the door, reporters were gathering. Inside, the monitor held the match seal like a verdict. The provost looked at Harold. Professor, did you review this overlay before recommending the wording change? He hesitated. That hesitation answered first. I saw an earlier version, he said. Mara spoke softly. This is the same version. Harold turned sharply toward her. She did not look away. Nia said, You doubted the interpretation because it contradicted your published classification. That is not true. Then which part of the match do you dispute? He looked back at the monitor. The crescent, the falcon, the border, the clay analysis, the burial context. No answer came. Nia stepped closer to the table. You called it excitement. You called it ambition. You called me an excavator as if the person closest to the ground could not also be closest to the truth. Harold's face hardened, but his authority had thinned. The provost lifted the cover from the tray. The small clay seal sat beneath the light, cracked, brown, and ordinary-looking to anyone who did not understand what it carried. A tiny royal mark pressed into earth centuries ago and wading through collapse, burial, scholarship, doubt, and a press briefing almost designed to soften it. The provost turned to Nia. What is the accurate statement? Nia took one breath. The Ashara Valley team has recovered a burial seal from Tomb 14, whose mark, material composition, residue profile, and secure burial context strongly support identification with the early Asharan royal house. Further peer review is ongoing, but the evidence requires reclassification of the tomb as potentially royal. Harold said quietly, Potentially. Nia looked at him. Scientifically responsible, not silent. The press briefing began 7 minutes late. Harold did not stand at the podium first. Nia did. Cameras lifted. Reporters leaned forward. The university communications director looked terrified but functional. Nia described the excavation, the sealed crypt, the conservation process, the clay analysis, and the matched burial seal. She did not exaggerate. She did not declare a queen by name. She did not turn uncertainty into spectacle. But she also did not bury the meaning. When the overlay appeared on the screen, the room changed. Even reporters who knew little archaeology understood a match when they saw one. A question came from the front row. Does this mean Professor Whitcomb's earlier classification of Tomb 14 was wrong? The room sharpened. Nia looked toward Harold, seated to the side. Then she answered. It means new evidence requires new interpretation. That is how scholarship is supposed to work. Harold lowered his eyes. After the briefing, he approached her near the display case. Nia, he said. Dr. Brooks, she replied. He paused, then nodded. Dr. Brooks, I owe you an apology. Yes. He absorbed the directness with visible discomfort. I dismissed the evidence too quickly. You dismissed me first. His face tightened. Then he said, Yes, I did. She waited. I treated your field interpretation as enthusiasm rather than scholarship. I also allowed my attachment to an old classification to shape my response. And he looked at the seal under glass. And I spoke from a hierarchy that has too often treated field directors, especially black field directors, as collectors of evidence rather than authors of interpretation. That was closer to the truth. Nia nodded once. Do better when the next discovery is not on camera. I will. Support the reclassification in writing. He looked at her. That was the real test, not apology, citation, authorship, record. I will, he said. Months later, the first peer-reviewed article appeared with Nia as lead author, Mara the conservator as co-author, and Harold listed only for historical classification context. The title was careful and powerful, a royal burial seal from Tomb 14 in the Ashara Valley. The paper did not destroy Harold's career. It did something more useful. It corrected the record. And in archaeology, where Earth keeps truth longer than reputations do, that mattered more.